Good evening. Before I begin my introduction, I would direct you to the program where Gordon's bio is well described. The good news for all of us is that you can read it at your leisure rather than have me stumble through it for you. It is thorough and it is impressive. Now, my name is Tim Kerr, and it is my honor to introduce my friend Gordon Neufeld. I've been fortunate to know Gordon for over 20 years. My first encounter with him was with my then girlfriend Sylvia. We thought if we took Gordon's parenting class, that after 8 sessions, we would know absolutely everything necessary to bring up my 3-year-old son Sam. Boy, were we surprised. Actually, it turned out to be a pretty good beginning. Later, Gordon helped Sylvia and myself bring up our 2 sons, Matt and Charlie. If truth be known, he mainly helped Sylvia and I grow up. Today, I believe I owe a great deal to Gordon. I have 3 interesting, interested, curious sons who all communicate with me. We have a relationship that is both talk and listen, hopefully not at the same time. Gordon taught me to make time for my kids, and most important, listen to them. Everything he taught me was simple, uncomplicated, and intuitive. That is, simple, but not necessarily easy. For the last couple of years, my foundation has helped Gordon expand his work to effectively broaden the reach of his wisdom. Rather than winding down his career and becoming a grandparent, Gordon is gearing up. Through the internet and worldwide speaking engagements, a virtual Neufeld Institute has been formed, and Gordon is sharing his insights to an eclectic group of interns and associates from around the globe. I've been fortunate enough to meet some of these interns, and it is safe to say they are both smart and keen. I support Gordon's work for a couple of reasons. The first is personal and obvious. He has helped and continues to guide Sylvia and me through the maze of parenthood. The other reason is probably as or more compelling. I believe in a broad sense his work is truly important. He travels the world answering questions like, why are there so many bullies? Why are codes of silence so powerful? Why do kids value their friends more than their parents? All of us need answers to questions like these today. Gordon has many of these answers. It is our good fortune to hear him speak this evening. I welcome Dr. Gordon Neufeld.
Thank you, Tim, for your warm, generous introduction, and thank you for your welcome. It's wonderful to see this house from this end, not just the other. I'm used to being on the other side. I must admit, though, that there was a part of me that was wishing for a really big snowstorm so that I could be delivered from this moment. But there's another part of me that would have been keenly disappointed because after 35 years of trying to join the dots, a picture has emerged that I need to talk about. And so thank you for giving me the chance this evening to talk about that picture. I hope I can give you a glimpse of it, put it into words. It's always hard to put pictures into words. And this one is particularly difficult, and I'll go into this as we go further into this. It's not that the knowledge isn't intuitive, but intuition is knowledge without words. And in our society, that isn't enough to be able to inform our practice of parenting and teaching. We need to become conscious now of certain things that we never needed to become conscious of before. Culture was able to take care of a lot of things through its tradition, through its rituals. And now, as we know, society has taken an economic turn. It serves the dollar rather than relationships. And so we're left having to become conscious of things that our parents and grandparents never needed to. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. This place obviously was designed for music and not words. I won't indulge you tonight. That would certainly spoil it. But I hope that my words, at least by the time we get to the end, will be music to your ears. Although I'm sure at the beginning there'll be a discordant note or two, or a melancholy note. But it is what I'm sharing with you tonight. I believe every parent and teacher needs to become conscious of if we're going to be an instrument of change in our society. I'll introduce the topic tonight. What I want to talk about is context. The role of context in parenting and teaching. Now, context is that which is usually invisible. We don't think about it. We don't necessarily have to be conscious of it. But depending upon context, it can very much change the response that is evoked in us. Now, to put it simply, the context for parenting and teaching, in most simple terms, is a child's relationship to those who are responsible for them. The whole context for raising a child. This seems so simple when said. This should be so obvious. And yet it doesn't inform prevailing practice today in parenting or teaching. You can read book upon book upon book, listen to expert upon expert. There's not a course in our universities today in teaching that actually focuses on the student-teacher relationship. The single most important thing that we should be aware of, somehow we are blind to. I'm not sure what causes that blindness. Maybe we were never meant to know about this. How do you spell out relationship? It's very difficult. Maybe it's because it's right underneath our noses, and we can't see what is underneath our noses. There's a blind spot there. It's simply too close for us to be able to make sense of. It seems to me that when we do see it, it becomes so self-evident that we see it all over the place. It screams at us from the rooftops, as I find it screaming at me. I promise not to scream at you tonight. But it becomes so obvious when you see it. Now, I know that I am, in a sense, preaching to the choir here this evening. Although I also am sure that some of you had your arms twisted by well-meaning friends and acquaintances. It's what I want to do is to be able to simply contribute to the opening of eyes, to give words to that which is usually intuitive, to something that should resonate. And that's what I hope to contribute to this evening. Let me go. Before I begin, I'd like to just take a look at the term context, because I'm going to use it as a theme as I unfold the material this evening. Context literally means con, with, text, the words. What comes with the words? It's what comes with the words that can actually evoke the response in us. It's that part again which we don't pay that much attention to, but we respond intuitively to. Now, I'm sure that we've all read a Shakespeare play, maybe back in high school, and then we saw it professionally produced. And we saw the words in a context we had not imagined them before. And those words, when we heard them presented, evoked a completely different response than when we had read them. Macbeth, Julius Caesar, Hamlet. Let me illustrate by a very common phrase, I love you. I love you, said by a boy to his puppy, said by a grandmother to her granddaughter. I love you, said by a 3-year-old for the very, very first time to his mommy. I love you. Said by one spouse in the midst of some marital conflict. Said by a high school coach to a 14-year-old girl on his volleyball team. Said by a complete stranger you suspect of stalking you. I could go on and on and on. You get the picture, right? You get the picture. It evokes a completely different response depending upon context. And I'm going to change it a bit. Instead of that which comes with the words, we're going to look at that which comes with the child. That which comes with the child, to parenting, to teaching, to the action, to the scene of the action, is most important in determining the response of that child. And that's what we have no words for. That's what we only have intuition for. And I get told over and over again when I talk, I knew that. I knew what you were saying, but I didn't know that I knew that. I felt it intuitively, but I had no words. And that's exactly what I want to share. Why do we need words now? We need words because culture is not calling forth those intuitions like they used to. It has changed. And without words, we can't come to consciousness. And without consciousness, we can't inform practice. And so the words become important. And so it is that which I want to talk about. It's that which comes with the words, but not the words. It's that part of the factor that in the equation that is generally wordless. And so that's my challenge. My challenge is to find those words, to be able to convey them, to bring them out. Sometimes I have to invent them. Because again, it's so close to us, those words simply don't exist for us. And so that is what I'm going to try again. And I'm going to take 3 common actions in parenting. 3 common actions in parenting and teaching. And take a look at those actions, what those actions evoke in a child, depending upon what the child brings with them. And in this case, we're focusing, of course, on relationship matters. That relationship is the most important factor in the parenting equation. In that illustration I gave you in terms of I love you, the words were the same. In each case, the relationship was different. And it was the relationship, because of the relationship being different, that would evoke a different response in the listener, in the recipient, and so on. And so these 3 illustrations, or these 3, in a sense, actions. First of all, to give direction. That is our responsibility as parents and teachers, to give direction to children. We start, time to get up, time to go to bed. Eat your vegetables, pay attention, turn off the TV. In school, we give directions about what to study, why to study, where to study, all of those kinds of things. Directions all the time. We're giving directions, and rightly we should. It's our responsibility to give directions. What prompts our directions, of course, is a child in need of direction, and being a child, you're always in need of direction and guidance. So this is one of our primary responsibilities. If you would look at how much of your interaction is actually giving directions. You're actually telling a child what to do, what to think, how to think, where to go, all the time. Can you imagine being in their position? So what prompts us, as I say, is seeing a child in need of direction. What the focus is on the parenting literature is how to do it. As simple as you can, as concise as you can, as clearly as you can, and as consistently as you can. You've all heard that over and over and again. And you've got to give the directions so they can be followed. So there you have it. Many books saying the same thing over and over again. But basically, it is in terms of how to give direction to your child. Now, this particular interaction usually happens in a certain setting, in one's house. And we do feel that that is what gives us the responsibility, and it certainly does. In my house, I ask you to. In my house, in our home, you need to. And so it gives us both a responsibility, and many times we also feel it gives us our right. It entitles us to. Or, alternately, in my class. How did you like that? Want to see that again? There we are. In my class. Sometimes I have fun doing these kinds of things. It's just, okay, can I play for a while? And so on. In my school, in my classroom, you will do this, you will do that, we will do this, and so on and so on and so on. Again, we certainly are responsible. And we think often it also gives us the right in terms of doing these things. But here's the problem. If we got all of this right, if we covered all our bases, usually we think if we do this, if we get the timing right, if we're consistent, if we're clear, if we give directions that can be followed, if it's in our house, in our home, in our classroom, where it should be, then if we do all of this properly, we should have a successful outcome. But it's what we don't see here that tells the story. It's what we don't see that determines the outcome. These are important elements, but they are not pivotal. They don't control what the outcome will be. What a child brings to the equation, what a child brings is what is going to determine whether that child is receptive or resistant. What is it then? We would ask, what is it? What comes with the child for the direction to be received? Well, one of two things. In joining the dots over the years, one of two things. It's quite simple, really. The first is that the child must be using the adult as a compass point. Must be getting his bearings from the adult. Having a sense of when he's with the adult or the person giving the direction, it's that he's not lost. That he, in a sense, is at home. He has a sense of where he is and following directions. But here's the thing, that a compass point is not declared by the person giving the directions. The compass point is a function of relationship. The science of relationship we now call attachment. And so here we see that it's not the setting that renders a child. It's not because it's in my house or in my class or in my school. It's because the child has attached to the adult that makes of that adult a compass point, automatically setting up that parent to be able to, or that teacher, or the step-parent, or the foster parent, or a grandpa, or grandma, or uncle and aunt,
for the child to be receptive to those directions. Now, if a child is more attached to his peers, then it's his peers that are his compass point, his peers from which he takes his directions, from peers automatically taking his guidance. It doesn't matter how consistent they are. It doesn't matter how clear they are. It doesn't matter whether directions can be followed. It matters only that they're the compass point. That is why we must be the compass points of our children. Why we must be the compass points of our students. Because as parents, our responsibility is to give that direction, give that guidance. We can't be that. We cannot do that without the help of their attachment. It's what designates us. It's what gives us our authority in that way. Now, there's another issue here. Not only must a child be attached to the person giving it directions, to be responsive, to be receptive to those directions, but the child must be attached in what we would call the dependent mode. Attachment comes in two sets of instincts. They're meant to match, really. When we get attached, no matter who we are, how old we are, we get attached in one of two modes. There is the dependent mode, to look up to seek for assistance, to seek for guidance and direction, to defer, to depend upon, to look to be taken care of. And then there's the alpha mode, which is its match, to assume responsibility, to give the orders, to give the direction, to take care of, to look out for. And those two are meant to fit together quite perfectly. And so we have the alpha complex, and even in all the animal world, this is true. This is true. And we have the dependent complex. And that leads to the attachment dance. Attachment is about facilitating dependence, so it makes sense. So not only must the child attach to the teacher, not only must the child attach to the parent, but the child must attach in the dependent mode. Because only in the dependent mode does it feel right to receive direction. Does it feel right to take orders? Does it feel right to accept commands? Does it feel right to follow? In the alpha complex, the instincts are to lead, not to follow, to give the orders, not to take them, to give the commands. We have a problem, is that in North America, for some reason, we're having an epidemic of alpha children. Children who boss their parents around, who tell their parents what to do, who are demanding, who give the orders. I've even had children who time out their parents, give them the silent treatment. And I even had two in my practice who locked their parents out until they would out of the house until they would do their bidding. It feels right for these alpha children to be doing so. In our North America, we see these children as strong. We see them as independent. Yes, they're not dependent upon us. They're meant to be dependent upon us. We confuse this with being strong. In actual fact, they're attaching in the wrong mode. Many of the immigrants coming into our country say how different North American children are from virtually anywhere else in the world. And I believe because we have lost something here. Now, why is it that children are not attaching in the dependent mode? I think it's primarily because we're not accepting our rightful position. There's many reasons for this, but one of the most significant reasons is for children to depend upon us, we've got to give a strong presence. We've got to be able to assume that rightful place, that alpha place. I will take care of you. You can lean on me. that wonderful sense that I am your answer. You're lucky to have me. I'm your best bet. There is that wonderful place in the alpha position where you move to assume responsibility, not to lord it over a child. I'm not talking about that. And people can abuse it in that way. But there is that place where you are responding. You move to that place where you know you are your student's answer. You are your child's answer. I believe that as parents and as teachers, and I see this all over in terms of teachers too, we have now moved into the dependent mode ourselves. Parents and teachers are asking for direction. That's the most common thing I get asked. What should I do? How do I act? Please, Dr. Neufeld, give me some direction. And I say, I dare not. Because if you take direction from me, you are in the dependent mode. Your children must never see you that way. They must never see you that way. And we have thousands of experts that are dumbing parents down every day. The thing about our grandparents is they knew that they didn't know. They didn't read books like you and I. Not on parenting, not on teaching. They knew they didn't know, but they knew they had to bluff it. Because that's a lot what the alpha does. You have to be the answer to your child. You have to find inside of yourself as a teacher that you are the answer of the student, not know the answers. Be the answer. And that makes all the difference. We're giving a rise to a whole generation of parents who look like deer caught in the headlights. Can you imagine going to a therapist? Well, and he says to you, well, I don't know. This is my first time. Clients don't come with a manual, you know. I'm not sure if I can help you. You have to assume the alpha position. You bluff it until it comes true. And that's the part that our children need. Our children need us to present ourselves in that way. I am your best bet. You can lean on me, and then hope like anything we can figure out how to do this thing. I will take care of you, and then figure out how we will do so. But they need from us that strength of confidence that comes from that place so that they can take their rightful place. And unless they take their rightful place, we have a generation of children who are resisting direction. Some of them are attached properly, but some of them are not in a right relationship because they're having the last word. They're in the alpha position. We need to find our way back to this. We know this intuitively. What I'm trying to do is put some words to it so we can find it consciously. If we are the designated, or we are the compass point, of course, then we also need to act that way. We need to act true to that. We need to be able to give directions responsibly. But the key thing here is for the child's receptiveness is that they need to be in right relationship with the adults who are giving direction to them. There's another condition here, another thing that will lead to receptiveness on the part of a child. And this is if the child has a sense of heading someplace, if he has a sense of heading someplace that the directions would facilitate. So if this is true, if the child has a sense of being at the steering wheel of life, the driver's seat of life, so to speak, if this is true, then and the direction is facilitative of that, then the child will be receptive. But what gives rise to this? What gives rise to a child being full of aspirations, goals, wants, ideas, of wanting to to be his own person, wanting to chart his own directions, to find his own meanings? The answer is very simple here. This too is a function of relationship. Before a child has a venturing forth kind of energy, before a child feels it at the steering wheel of life, before they are in the driver's seat, they first, by default, are looking for home base. They're looking for a place that the attachment can be secure. The contact and closeness is not in question. They need to be able to take that for granted. I always know when I meet a child who's curious, who's venturing forth, who has aspirations that truly come from themselves, who is emerging as a viable person with their own meanings, that somewhere in this child's life is somebody who is playing home base. Somebody who is actually taking the role upon them of making sure the contact and closeness is secure, that nothing will come between, allowing themselves to be taken for granted in the sense of the connection, of mattering, of significance, so that nature can change gears and the child venture forth. As soon as home base is not secure, the first thing the child does is scramble back. There's many children today who are preoccupied with trying to find home base. And of course, if children are attached to their peers, their home base is continually insecure. They can never go anywhere. They become more preoccupied. And we have a whole generation of children who are becoming addicted to the search for home base, staying in touch, MSN, chat lines, having to be in contact all the time. All the venturing forth energy is gone. The ones who can best serve this purpose are moms and dads, our grandparents, are those who know what a child needs, but somebody has to step forth to do this. Peers can't do this. I'll never forget Braden, my youngest of the five. He was only 3 or 4 years of age. And he captured this dynamic beautifully of venturing forth and home base. It's a very simple statement. My wife Joy was giving him a hug. It was at bedtime. And he said, "Mommy, when you hug me like that, it makes me feel like I can fly." Mommy was taking care of home base. Mommy was taking care of the contact and closeness, so nature could make him want to fly. Venture forth. How do we get a venturing forth child? We give them a home base. You can't make it happen. You can't push it. You've got to give them a home base. Back to the scene of the action here. So, receptivity to direction then is a function of relationship, pure and simple. Directly, it is a result of the child's being in right relationship with whoever is giving directions. Not only attached, but attached in a dependent mode. It renders that child receptive. Or indirectly, a product of another relationship, someplace where somebody is serving as home base. The child feels secure, can take it for granted, and now nature can get on with the energy of being able to venture forth. Excuse me. Now the child feels at the steering wheel of life. But if these things are missing, first of all, if one is there, that is great. If 2 are there, that's even better. 1 is sufficient to do the job, but 2 is much better. But if both of these are missing, there is neither one or the other, then we have a problem. It doesn't matter how perfectly you do your job. It doesn't matter how clear you are, how concise you are. And somebody, your substitute teacher, another individual might say exactly what you say. So many times parents are saying, well, just tell me what to say. Give me the words so I can know, model them for me. It's not that at all. That's not the pivotal factor. It's your child's relationship to you that's going to determine the outcome, whether it's resistance or whether it is receptivity. The default setting for children, in terms of direction that is actually resistance. That's the default setting. It is for most of us. If anybody pushes us around, tries to tell us what to do, we get our back up. Unless, of course, we're attached to them or we were going in that direction in the first place. But other than that, we balk. If they tell us to hurry up, we feel like slowing down. None of us takes kindly to what feels like coercion, and it always feels like coercion when we're not attached or when we're not going in that direction. The name I give it is CounterWill. I talk about it a lot, my teachings and my writing. It's an absolute significant dynamic. Interesting enough, there was no word for it in the English language. And I had to go to a very old German theorist, long time ago, he's long dead, at the turn of the last century to find the term CounterWill. Very simple. I remember my first conscious experience of CounterWill. I'm sure I had lots before this time, but this was grade 2. Now I've got to give you a context here. Grade 1, and I'll talk about this in the book, grade 1 was Mrs. Ackerbrook. If you read the book, you'll have been introduced to Mrs. Ackerbrook. Wonderful. I gave her my heart. I fell in love with her. I was loyal to her. Her wish was my command. I took her directions. I was receptive. And I thought that I was a very good boy because of that. And I thought that I was a smart boy, but it was most likely probably because I was so attached to her. Then came grade 2. And I'll never forget my first experience. The grade 2 teacher was orienting us, giving us directions. First day of class, I believe it was, if my memory serves me right. On the board, she was listing her set of expectations. And on this set of expectations, she wrote, in terms of the board, in that wonderful Maclean's printing that she was modeling, etc., is that I do not want to find anyone playing tag on top of the desks. It had never occurred to me. In 2 weeks, I found myself playing tag on top of the desk. Promptly sent to the principal's office. In those days, the strap was on the wall, and it came down quite quickly. And the principal, Mr. Leversage, he, of course, said, "Gordy, why did you do this?" I had no words. I didn't know. I thought I was a good boy. I'd never been sent to the office before. He thought I was a good boy. I had no words. It bothered me. It bothered me great. It still bothers me today, but now I understand. But that wasn't the end of it. It came October, and in those days, the RCMP came to give to impress us all. They gave an assembly. They had their scarlet finest on. And so we were all there. And my grade 3 teacher says to me, to the whole class, "Now I don't want any of you to embarrass me and yell boo in the assembly." I never saw it coming. You have to realize I was shy, I was timid, I was the least you'd ever suspect of this. I thought I was a good boy. And when it came time for everybody to applause, out of me spontaneously, without thought or came the loudest boo that absolutely alarmed and surprised me as well. I was marched off to the principal's office again, Mr. Leversage, now with the strap in his hand. And he says to me, "Why, Gordy, did you do it?" Now I have the words. 55 years later, I have the words, and I'm looking for all the Mr. Leversages in the world to tell them. It's called CounterWill. It's very simple. When somebody orders you around, tells you what to do, and you don't like them, it makes you feel like doing the opposite. When somebody tells you what to do, and they haven't collected your heart, it occurs to you, it gives you instincts to work to rule, to do the least possible that's expected, and all of those kinds of things. Again, it's called counterwill. It's one of the most common dynamics among children. Relationship matters. It makes all the difference. The good instincts, the good impulses that I took personally were not in me. I wanted to be good for Mrs. Ackerberg because I was attached to her. When my grade 2 teacher asked me to do things, it actually caused the opposite reaction. I don't know if she was any worse teacher than Mrs. Ackerberg. The difference was that I was not attached to her. Now what happens? What happens when we expect resistance from our children? When we don't get what it is, or when we anticipate the work to rule campaign, the doing as little as they have to, when we anticipate oppositionality, when we anticipate all of this, there are one of two reactions. Some start backing off, and we have permissiveness not giving direction, which is irresponsible as parents. Others move to embellish their direction, say it harder, up the ante, use force, coercion, explanations, reason, anything to be able to up the coercion. The problem is, if the relationship isn't there, it just makes matters worse. The greater the coercion, the greater the resistance. The greater the resistance, the more the embellishment of directions. And now we're in a place in parenting and teaching where we have become preoccupied with this process of how to get a child to do your bidding. The answer is not in how to. The answer is not in the setting. It doesn't matter how good one is at doing this. The answer is in the child's relationship to the person doing the directing, doing the bidding, imposing their will. With the embellishment, of course, we're using tricks, 1 to 3 magic, consequences. We're using withdrawal of sanctions. We're adding to things. And if these things don't work, we're increasingly sending our children to doctors to find out what's wrong with them. And they are increasingly sending our children back and saying, well, he's got oppositional defiant disorder. There's something wrong with his brain. There is absolutely nothing wrong with their brains. That's the default setting. There is something dreadfully wrong with a society who thinks that we can boss children around, tell them what to do, when we are not their compass points. We've got to be able to become the compass points of our children. We have to become conscious of this. Culture isn't doing this for us automatically anymore. Not connecting children to their grandparents or their uncles or aunts, not even their step-parents or their foster parents, and they're falling out of attachment with their own parents. And then we run into trouble. Again, it's our questions are wrong. We're asking, how do I do this? When we should be asking the question, more is, how do I win my child's heart? How do I preserve the sense of connection? How do I get the kind of relationship that leads to receptivity in a child? Well, I'm going to go on to a second scenario. I'll move through a little bit quicker now. This one, though, is a very significant one, confronting with futility. We do this all the time. We don't call it this, and so I'll explain it a little bit. When we're confronting with futility, and by futility, I mean anything that is outside of the child's control, any reality that they cannot change, any restriction, any lack, any decision that is out of their control, circumstances and so on, laws of nature. You could go on and on and on. There's no more. I said no. That's all the story. There's all the time there is tonight. It's time to go. I can't let you do this. And on and on and on. Every time that we put into a child's face something which they cannot control, something they cannot change, this is where we are confronting with futility. This is a very important process, very important. Humans are the most adaptive of all creatures, but they don't adapt unless they have something to adapt to. And so we are the ones to present them with that reality. You're having a baby brother. Mom and dad are splitting. Grandma's sick. Your sister decided no. And on and on and on, we present all the futilities, all the things in their life. And intuitively so, it's our responsibility to foster this adaptation. It's a significant part of parent and teaching. We must do it. We should do it. In our home, there are restrictions, the lacks, the rules. And of course, in school is full of it. Much of what we call discipline is part of this process. When we withdraw privilege, we say what I can do and you can't do anything about it. We're confronting them. We're putting that futility in their face. When we give a consequence, we do this. We're putting that futility. When we send them to their rooms, we do this. We confront them with the futility. All of this is confronting with futility. Again, the focus is what provokes it is usually a child in need of changing. That is, a child needs to change in some way. They need to come to terms with a reality that they're up against. They need to accept something. They need to change the error of their course of action. And so what prompts us is seeing their need, and we focus on how to do this, although again it's not called by this name. I think it's important to see what the real interaction is, because then we understand the purpose it is, and it's meant to play in human growth, in human adaptation. It's meant to promote adaptation, and adaptation here in psychology or developmental psychology means deep change. It's that process by which we become changed when we're up against something we cannot change. It's a process by which we come to accept reality. Not only that, but come to be resilient. We learn that we can live with this. We can accept this. We can deal with this. But this requires adaptation, not just superficial adjustment. This requires adaptation, a very, very important, very, very significant process. But it depends upon what a child, again, brings to this equation. It depends upon what the child brings to that determines the outcome. We could do all of this perfectly. And I don't believe that we're doing things much differently than what parents and teachers have been doing for years. But it's not working out as well. And it's not working out as well because we're losing the context. We're losing the context in which it was meant to work. Now, depending upon what the child brings to them to this equation, it can lead to either adaptation, the deep change we desire. A child learns his lessons or accepts a lack or restriction, accepts a sibling in the family, or the death of grandma, is able to deal with a restriction, or the alternative to adaptation is aggression. And we're giving rise to an epidemic of escalating aggression among our children. And so we know that there is something not working. Suicide rates have gone up fourfold in less than half a century among children. Their culture is being filled with attacking energy. Something is amiss. For a child to adapt, two things must be there. Two things must be in order, both of which are a product of relationship. First, a soft heart. Why a soft heart? It's very simple. Daniel Goleman was here just a couple of weeks ago in this very same place, speaking to what now has become the most significant issue, the role of emotion in adaptation. We now know that adaptation is an emotional process, not something of the head. It's not that we know something doesn't work, know a rule, a lack, or that grandma is with us no more, or that I have to share my mother with a sibling and I can't get her back into the womb from whence she came. And I can't win all the time and be best all the time. It's not enough to know those things. I have to have felt the futility of those things. I have to feel them. It's the emotion, the limbic system, which we call in the brain, the limbic system, which is in charge of adaptation. And so, in other words, futility has to sink in. It has to be felt at the heart level. Now, I'll use the heart here as an analogy. Back we are to the heart. The heart is a metaphor of emotion. The heart is a metaphor, of course, of vulnerability. And it is in the heart that adaptation lies. Now, the thing about this is, and what we first of all discovered about humans way back 100 years ago, was that humans were very vulnerable creatures, easily wounded. And that the brain does not stand idly by. When the vulnerability is too much to bear, or if a child has been born too sensitive for the world he finds himself in, defenses are erected. Now we can take pictures of these. We know that what happens is children can numb out. There are emotional filters in the limbic system that numb out the feelings. Soon we have children saying, "I'm okay, are you okay?" I thought I was shot, but I'm still standing. Take a drink of water and hope it goes away. Back I was. There's filters in the brain that can numb vulnerable feelings. So a child pretty soon is saying, "I don't care, it doesn't matter." Starts losing feelings of excitement, enthusiasm, responsibility, remorse, shame, embarrassment. And our children are losing their feelings in spades. And the first feelings to go are the feelings of futility. Inside, the feelings of sadness and disappointment. Those feelings are absolutely essential for the adaptive process. They are pivotal feelings in human adaptation. And our children are losing them. A deeper cut is when children can no longer see those things that would make them feel bad. Now children don't see rejection, don't see that they're not invited into somebody's company. They don't see trouble. They don't see trouble coming. And we're giving rise to many of these children as well. These are children who are numbed out, who are tuned out, who are defended against the vulnerability of their existence. We also know that the most common wounds that children experience are when they experience too much separation, whether it's physical or psychological, rejection, ostracization, not being wanted, not being invited. Too much shame, feeling as if there's something wrong with them. And of course, any one of us, if we felt too much fear, too alarmed, our brain could not withstand that and needs to defend against it. Most often, these defenses are just situational. But unfortunately, those defenses can get stuck. And the earlier these experiences, the more these defenses, a child becomes numbed out and tuned out. When I worked, first of all, it first started my professional career in the prison system, I was amazed. I was amazed at the degree of defense against vulnerability. Some of these kids had 80% less feelings than normal kids had. Now, we looked at their behavior. We call them delinquents. But what we didn't see is they were numbed out. They were absolutely numbed out. And that was where the problem was. Children are losing their feelings. And when they lose their feelings, of course, they lose that place of adaptation. We also know that the most common cause of these wounds in our society now, according to the research, is peer interaction. But our children have never had more peer interaction than they're having today. In fact, we start sending them out at age 2 and at age 3, even despite the research that comes back, because now we can actually measure stress for children. Now we actually have the cotton swabs that we can put on their saliva and find the cortisol levels going up. And we find that when these children are outside the context of safe relationships, when they're in the peer interaction, their stress level, they are getting wounded, they're getting hurt, and it's provoking defenses against that hurt. That peer interaction is the most common source of wounding. So this brings to the question, how then do we keep our children safe? How do we protect their hearts? How do we protect the place from which they can feel the sadness and be moved easily to the sadness or disappointment about the things that do not work in their life? How can we do this? Well, science has also answered this question, and I think we knew this intuitively. The way we keep children safe is not through safe school programs, is not through telling our children to be nice, not be mean, don't pick on each other. They've done that for eons, and we'll never be able to stop them. There's only one way we can keep them safe. There's more research on this probably than any other single factor, and it's powerful research. The thing which keeps a child safe, which protects her heart, is a strong emotional connection with a caring adult. And the research says that in many cases that caring adult can be a teacher. It can be a grandma. It can be an aunt. One place in their life in which the child, that person matters so much. I am so glad Mrs. Ackerberg was that person to me, because in my school there was Nick, Jim, and Butch. I hope you're not here tonight. And I got wounded. I got hurt. I can remember it. It's not that Mrs. Ackerberg protected me from getting pushed in the ditch, my lunch being taken away from me, being put down, being bullied. That's not what she did. It's because what she thought of me mattered more than what Nick, thank you, Jim, and Butch thought of me, that protected me from those wounds. Do you follow me here? My mother had my heart. Mrs. Ackerberg had my heart, and therefore they could keep it in safekeeping. It didn't mean that I wasn't wounded. It meant that my brain didn't have to numb me out and tune me out. And it meant that I could still find my sadness and my disappointment about the things that did not work. That is the key issue. Little story that goes along with that. I had keynoted for Canada's first national symposium on bullying, giving a very different approach from this developmental approach, that bullying is deeply embedded in instinct and emotion. And Vicki Gabbro was asked to put on a 2-hour special, a national program on bullying. And there were a number of experts, as well as 3 parents whose children had actually suicided as a result of being bullied. And also a mother who was very much a lobbyist for safe schools. And her I think, 11-year-old daughter was her age. The 11-year-old daughter had a chance to be interviewed by Vicki Gabbro, and she spoke about how she was teased, taunted at school. She came home every day crying to her mother, telling the stories of how she was, gave quite a story about that bullying, and captured the hearts of the audience that were there. Vicki Gabbro came up to me during the break and said, we were on first name basis because of our CBC days, and said, Gordon, I'm very concerned about this girl. Might not she be at risk for suicide as well? My response was, no, Vicki, she's safe. She's safe. Oh, she hurts. She's wounded. She cries. But she's safe. The stories of the children who had suicided, they were an enigma to their parents. They had attached to their peers. What their peers thought of them mattered far more than what their parents were. Their parents were unable to shield them because those children had lost that shield. They were unable to keep their hearts soft, unable to keep them from wounds. The mother, and the mother was a very noisy mother, the mother, despite all her lobbying, this isn't what kept her daughter safe. What kept her daughter safe is her daughter's relationship to her mother. That's what kept her safe. What her mother thought of her meant more than anybody else. Mother was her home base. Mother was her shield. And it was the fact that that attachment was there that meant that she could have her sadness, she could have her disappointment. She would survive, she would become resilient. She would be able to deal with taunting and teasing because of this. But this is how we keep children safe. That message needs to be known in our society today, because we are spending millions and starting to spend probably close to billions of dollars on trying to make children be nice to each other, not be mean, not pick on each other, when we're neglecting the thing that is the most important thing of all. We've got to be able to win their hearts. We've got to make sure to cultivate the kind of relationship, because unless we have their hearts, we'll never be able to keep their hearts safe, nor keep them soft. We have to have their hearts before we can protect them. Let me go to the other part here. The other part is a safe place to cry. It's interesting, very interesting, that when futility sinks in for a young child, when a child is moved, comes up against something they cannot change. Mommy said no, and it's not changing. You know, there's a limit, there's a lack. They're up against something that cannot be changed. When it really sinks in for a young child, when they get it and they're finally not fighting against the reality, it sinks in. What happens is when in the limbic system, signals are sent to the lacrimal glands and the eyes water. The eyes water. And so tears have become a symbol of transformation. They are a universal symbol of a deep change. And when we're really up against the things we cannot change, we can't hold on to our loved ones, rejection, death, and so on, the tears, of course, flow, because as we up against that futility, that's how we adapt. That's how we become transformed. It's quite transparent with children. And now the research is coming in that children need to find their tears relatively much in their first 5 years of life if they're going to be adaptive by the time they go to school. That they can't win everything, be best at everything, that they can't always get their own way. But the point is they have to have their tears about this. So not only do they have to have access, a soft enough heart, but they need to be able to find a place where they can feel their sadness. Well, that too is a matter of attachment. What creates a comforter is attachment. We feel the safest to find our sadness and our tears with those to whom we are attached. When I worked in the prison system, of course, with a whole population of kids who had lost their tears long ago, and I'd often ask them, if you did find your tears, if you could find your sadness, do you have any place in your life that would be safe to cry? And most of them said no. Isn't there a gram someplace? An aunt, a big sister, a mom, someplace? And many of them would say no, there's no safe place to cry. We need a safe place to cry. I'll never forget Julian, my grandson. I would be grandsitting him from time to time, age 3 and age 4. And of course I was needing to be responsible as an agent of futility, having to say no. Put up the wall, that's Grandpa's job, and so on and so on. And I could see that he was quite moved, but not to tears. It would be right, and you'd just be holding it inside of him. Now, he was very attached to me, but not attached to me enough to feel safe to cry. His mommy would come back, my daughter, Tasha, she would come back to collect him, and he would just make a beeline for her. Grandpa's so mean to me. And then burst into tears. My heart would go out to him, and I was so glad for him because he had a safe place to cry. Only one, but that's all we need. He's very much like his grandpa, only one, but it's all I need. But we need that place to find our sadness, to find our tears. We seem to have lost this wisdom in our society. We have become tear-phobic. We no longer know that sadness and disappointment are the keenest emotions, the most important part for this. Jung knew this. Carl Jung, when asked, what is the single most important emotion that is required to realize our potential as fully adaptive creatures, or some words like that? And he said, without a doubt, it's keen disappointment. We need to have soft hearts. We need to help our children have soft hearts. And give them the room, make it safe. In the absence of these things, back to the scene of the action here, what must be delivered to the encounter with futility here, rather, is a child with a soft heart and a place to cry. There we get adaptation. But if these things are missing, if these things are not there, it doesn't matter how perfect we are in giving this. It doesn't matter of confronting with this. It doesn't matter whether we've mastered the science of giving or the art of giving consequences, of withdrawing sanctions. These are ways that we push things, we push the futility of their course of action into their face. The fact is that we may do our part perfectly, but the bitter pill of futility can be one child's medicine and another child's poison, depending upon what they bring to them with the equation. If a child cannot access his sadness, that consequence, instead of bringing a child to adapt and learn his lesson at a deep way, that withdrawal of a privilege, that sanction, instead of being able to lead to a deep sense of resilience and bring that child to accept something they needed to accept, instead of that, it will actually make them mad. It will increase their frustration. It will elevate that frustration. Aggression is rooted in frustration, and when frustration doesn't turn to sadness, it leaves the child mad instead. And this aggression can build up and can take many forms. Self-attack, I'm so stupid I hate myself. Attacking others emotionally, I hate you. Physical attack, vicarious violence. And all of these things are increasing among children today. Why? It's not because we're doing things differently. There's always been all kinds of things that children are up against that they cannot change. But they have to have their sadness to become truly adaptive, realize their developmental destiny. Otherwise, they get stuck in mad. And our children are getting stuck in mad. It makes them want to hit. It makes them want to strike. It makes them want to smash something. And then their language becomes mad. Their music becomes mad. Their games are full of attacking energy. Why? Our children have lost their tears. Our children have lost the softness that moves them easily to feel the sadness about what doesn't work. Our children have lost the place to cry. This is a matter of relationship. Not how we do this. This is a matter of relationship. And what happens is our favorite treatment for aggression. What's our favorite treatment for aggression? What do? We put them into their face more futility. See what I can do to you that you can't change. See what I can take away from you. See, now I'm not going to let you, I withdraw the invitation to exist in my presence until you shape up. We push into their face more futility. That's our favorite treatment, which gets what? More aggression. We have a vicious cycle going on. We're tripping over our own children. And again, are we doing anything differently than our forefathers? I don't believe so. But culture had a certain wisdom embedded in it that children needed to find their sadness. We have lost that. We've gone to the head. Now we think it's logical. If we explain to them, if we reason with them, if we could only do this, if we give a consequence, then we can teach them a lesson. Again, the child who is able to find his sadness, confrontation with futility will be their medicine. The child who cannot find their sadness, the confrontation with futility will be their poison. it will lead to aggression. The very, very same action. Well, I have one more scenario that I want to quickly go over because I have other things that you want some answers to here, probably, right? Probably you want some answers. So we'll get to some answers. One more very quickly, though, here. One more scenario. And this is that we request that children consider each other. Be nice, not be mean. Don't pick on each other. Now, we've always done this, and we're only responsible doing this, especially in our home and our house, to be able to keep these places safe. This is what is required. But we're requesting probably consideration more so these days because we're putting children into situations in which they can hurt each other. And because they can hurt each other, because it's more common now for children to be in social scenes with each other, before they're really prepared to be so, that we are now so full of requests. Don't be mean. Don't hurt another. Please respect. Be nice. Don't pick on, and so on. Now, again, the very same thing is, but I won't belabor it as much. Depending upon what the child brings with them, we could get either caring or bullying behavior. Get some things in between too here, but this is just to illustrate. What is required? What must come with the child for consideration to be the result? Two things. First of all, a caring spirit. A child must be instinctively moved to care. You don't have to teach this. You can never teach a child to care. You can teach a child how to care, but you can't teach a child to care. This is part of our human instinct and emotion. The other thing is a tempered mind. But let me go back, first of all, to the caring spirit, then I'll explain what I mean also by a tempered mind. A caring spirit is the fruit of a relationship in a number of ways. First of all, to care about or to care for is to be attached. That is, it is a synonym of attachment. To be attached to an outcome of an exam is to care about that. To care is to be attached. To care is part of the repertoire of attachment. And so when a child can attach easily to things, to people, a child comes to care for those. Care about dolls, care about puppy. You find this great caring spirit. So a child must be open to attachment for this to occur. Secondly, it's only when a child feels taken care of that they are generous in their response to others to be moved likewise to take care of. Otherwise, when children don't feel taken care of, and bullies don't feel taken care of, they use the social situations to take matters into their own hands. The bully is about taking care of their own needs, to take care of themselves, and that always happens at the expense of others, at the expense of other children. And that's what is so odious about that. And so again, if we want to have children who are generous in their caring, it means that they need to have a place where they feel very taken care of themselves. Thirdly, to care is a very vulnerable experience because it sets you up for getting hurt. And so to care is a result of having a soft heart. The Care Bears got that right. You have to have a soft heart. How do you have a soft heart? Well, a soft heart is one who is shielded in a safe attachment with an adult someplace. That child is attached, so their heart can stay soft enough to be moved to care. And so it is a product of relationship that the child comes with. There's much that could be said about this. I do developmental roots of social responsibility for educators, and there's many, many nuances to this. But we must remember, first and foremost, that it's not something you can get from the outside. It is something that has to come from the inside, and that is a product of relationship. There's one more thing to this, is the child has to be, as we said, have a tempered mind. What does this mean, a tempered mind? Well, a tempered mind means that a child can have double feelings, mixed feelings, feel both this and that at the same time. Something 3- and 4-year-olds have great difficulty with. You don't hear them very often say, on the other hand. I feel rather ambivalent about this. I'm pulled in two directions. I have second thoughts. In fact, you'll know some adults in your life who have never said those words. They don't experience them. They are very, very important. It's when our feelings mix and we have double thoughts. I can feel both my sense of wanting to belong and yet to be my own person. I can feel both my frustration and my caring simultaneously, that we get tempered behavior and tempered experience. This is a result of the tempered mind. This is very natural development. In the brain, there's a mixing bowl called the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't even get wired up for action until about 5 years of age. That's why kids before that can't do that. But it has to be practiced to grow, and you have to have very vulnerable feelings for the feelings to mix. And so we now know that the limbic system is in charge of brain development, and a relationship is what generates the kinds of warm feelings that allow for the brain to develop fully. That we have to have open feelings, warm feelings, and that caring mixes with all kinds of things to produce true caring and considerate behavior. It's a function of attachment. Even a rat's brain grows better in the context of attachment to the rat mother. It is all part of the development, the prefrontal cortex. These are things that cannot be taught. These are things that a child cannot learn. Caring and consideration are the fruit of relationship. Relationship matters. Now I'm going to move on. From here. The opposite, of course, is, first of all, just very quickly, is when these elements are missing, what happens is children are put into a situation in which their instincts are very different. If the child has a strong alpha complex, to be able to be the top, the last word, to dominate, to take charge, to give the orders, but they are defended against caring that should evoke, because when you're alpha, it is to care for someone, to take care of. And so if the child is defended against feelings of caring and responsibility, out of their mouth comes, I don't care, doesn't matter, whatever, and they never say, I'm sorry. So if you've got an alpha complex, but defended against the feelings that is meant to do, to become a mother hen, to take care of another, it leads to the bully instead. Now, the bully has instincts to exploit vulnerability and take advantage of the weak, the very opposite of a caring, considerate child. And bullying is on the rise in our society. It's not only Nick, Jim, and Butch anymore. In fact, the research says that the majority of children will identify with the bully instead of the victim. Meaning that the dynamics inside of them, that means not only is the alpha complex on the rise in our children, but also on the rise is a chorus of I don't care, doesn't matter, whatever. When you get the hardening of hearts and you get a movement into the alpha complex, you've got the making of a bully. And you can't unmake him by saying stop. The more consequences you throw at the bully, that is, the more we use what the bully cares about against him, it provokes further instincts to not care. Which means we've got further problems with bullying. There is no behavioral approach that can work for it. No withdrawal of sanctions that can work, because they harden. Whatever doesn't soften the heart hardens it further. The only answer is relationship. Only in relationship can we soften hearts. Only in relationship can we give them a sense of being taken care of. Only in relationship can we restore hierarchy. Can we restore caring and considerate? We need to melt their hearts. Now let me move on. To summarize this part of it, a child's attachments with adults responsible provides the context for raising children. We need to bring this into our consciousness. It needs to become the first principle of parenting and teaching. It's what every parent, as I said, ought to know, what every teacher ought to know. Now, I've talked about why attachments are important, why relationships are important, why relationships matter. Now I'd like to turn to matters of relationship, issues of relationship. And I'd like to organize that material very briefly, and I'll go through it. The first a little bit more, and then touch on the others, are the 3 R's of raising children. And by 3 R's of raising children, I mean the core curriculum, so to speak. Not all the things that we're doing to embellish our actions of confronting with futility, of direction, of demanding consideration, not the things that we're doing in terms of trying to arrange the best educational opportunity, give head start with helping children realize their talents, all of those kinds of things. What are the basics? What are the basics? What is the core curriculum of raising children? What is it that we should be becoming conscious of? The first relationship, of course, is this. They're all relationship, but here I want to talk briefly about how relationship develops, what it looks like. What does it look like when a child has a healthy relationship with an adult? What does it look like? A second concept is rest. Rest is extremely important from a developmental point of view. All growth emanates from a place of rest. We want our children to truly grow up, to become their own persons. Then they need rest. And relationship is the only place where they can possibly find rest. What does it mean to rest in relationship? And finally, room. The room to become their own persons, which only has a context, again, in relationship. Let me go to the first. How does relationship develop? This particular diagram and this particular idea is very foundational to all the work that I do in attachment and teaching. If you've heard me before, you'll have heard me talk on this. I actually had the opportunity to be able to present this theory to an international congress in Frankfurt on the 6 stages of attachment, and I was thrilled to have given the opportunity. What I'd like to have is just a whole week with you to talk about this. There is so much that could do. I set out by trying to look at all the attachment theories that existed, the science of relationship, to find out all the different ways there were of attaching. And to my surprise, when I got them all, they ended up to be sequential. And so I looked at my case studies of orphanage kids, of adopted kids, and so on, who had moved lately into attachment, and it made sense. And I hope it makes sense for you this evening as I quite quickly unfold it. This is a plant analogy. A plant attaches through its roots. What we're familiar with is what is on top of the soil. But as any gardener knows, there's at least as much that is underneath the soil. And that what's underneath the soil is by far the most important part of the process, because that's where you get the nurturants to be able to grow. And so this is a plant, the green, the potential of growth, and of course the first root, which is the attaching through the senses. The simplest, the basic, the most profound, that we want to be with those to whom we're attached. You kind of sat next to them if you could. Maybe you didn't and you wished you would. But we gravitate towards those that we are attached to. We want to be in sight and smell and hearing, in touch, and all the things that means. A marriage is an attachment. That is, it's two people, hopefully, that want to be with each other. If not, well, we won't go there. But this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. By the 2nd year of life, if all goes well, and the child is experiencing a little bit more separation from mom and dad now, and now the energy when he can't be with moves to being like. Now the child wants to emulate, imitate, take the same form as, talk like, sometimes it's embarrassing, act like, dress like. This is where they take on the same form. You don't have to stamp their form on the child. the child automatically takes on that form. That's how they learn language. That's even how the cockatiel does. That's even how the parrot does, how other animals do. It's all through this process of emulation, imitation, connection. And so if there's an attachment problem, there's a language acquisition problem. Now this is so simple, and yet this key doesn't even enter into the consciousness of our literacy programs at school. Let me just give you an example. About 15 years ago, some research came out that said 2-year-olds had hotspots in their brain for language acquisition. And a bunch of people went out making cue cards, and it led to the Doman method and getting super babies. And in Canada we thought, well, maybe that's when we can do the French bit and so on. And all went in terms of trying to enhance this language acquisition. And then they had trouble reproducing this research. And then someone had the idea that they would investigate these studies. They found out that in the first study, which showed these powerful results, the children were sitting on their mother's knee when the pictures of their brain was taken. In the other studies, they were sitting on the research assistant's knee. Relationship matters, right? These kids didn't have hotspots for language acquisition. They had hotspots for their mother. Now, everybody knows this intuitively. You all know that the best way to learn a foreign language is to have a hotspot for your foreign language instructor. You knew that. It's not the method. It's relationship. You see how simple it is. It's all that way. We all know this. You know, in the research, the big question is what therapeutic method works best? Now this argument is here again, and they forgot they've already done all of this. There was this huge research in the 60s and 70s, which method works best. They reviewed them all. They decided it wasn't about that at all. It was about the relationship of the client to the therapist. That's what made the difference. We all know that intuitively. We know it with the teacher. We wait with bated breath in the first 2 weeks of school for our kids, not to find out how many PhDs the teacher has, what the pedagogical style is and method, what their discipline method is. There's only one thing important. Does Gordy like his teacher and thinks the teacher likes him? That is the single most important factor in it. Again, relationship matters. Relationship matters. And this is relationship. Relationship is wanting to be with. Relationship is wanting to be like. And it moves on. By the 3rd year of life, it should unfold so that a child, now, the way to keep mommy close is you possess her. Don't let anything come between. There's jealousy and there's possessiveness, and if she talks on the phone, you make a scene and so on. And like a cat sitting on the newspaper, you possess the person that you're attached to. Well, that's a little bit difficult. That's when they get like Velcro on you. But the good news is that on the heels of it also come instincts of loyalty, to agree with, and that's very handy, to take the same side as, to make things work for you, and those deep instincts of loyalty to serve and obey. At the second level of attachment, the 2-year-old, there's not a single bone in their body that occurs to them to do your bidding. That's why we call it the terrible twos. But by 3rd year of life, this should be there. And if it isn't, we don't have the context to deal with children. It's a matter of relationship. If it's very difficult for children to attach for whatever reason, they don't get to this far, we have great difficulties because there is no instinct in them to do your bidding, to agree with you, to be on the same side as you. And that's dreadful trying to work with a child like this. Do you know how many children do not feel as if they belong to their parents or their teachers? I didn't belong to my grade 2 teacher. She didn't have my loyalty. My grade 1 teacher did. It's a matter of relationship. But it goes further. Attachment is very vulnerable business, so you have to have a soft heart. It has to open up. By the 4th year of life, it should occur to a child that mommy and daddy hold close that which they hold dear. And so the 4-year-old wants to become dear, to be significant, to matter to. They love stories in which they are told of how special they are, how mom and dad could hardly wait till they were born. They eat those stories up. The 2-year-old just sits on your knee. That's all it's, the 4-year-old wants to know that they matter, that they're important, that they're significant. This is a sense of significance, but when you want to matter to somebody, you can get deeply hurt by any sign that you don't matter to them. This is deeper now, but this relationship goes, now the child can glean more nurturance, but then comes the really good part. If everything is going well at this place, then by 5 years of age, if everything unfolds, some earlier, some later, fortunately it's never too late. I've seen this happen at 50 and 60 years of age. Is that everything goes well and it's safe enough, the limbic system gets fully involved, and the child gives his heart away. If he is attached to his kitty, he now loves his kitty. If he's attached to his grandma, he loves his grandma. Hearts are on his cards. Hearts are everywhere. He's given his heart away. This word we call love in many, many ways. And if this all unfolds and the child doesn't get hurt too much and can withstand the vulnerability involved, then the 6th stage involves sharing what is in your heart with others. This is called psychological intimacy. Now we feel close to those who know us best, who we share our secrets to, who listen and understand. This is relationship. The more parts of attachment are there, the healthier the relationship. For marriage, for friendship, but especially for parents and for teachers. If I didn't have the hearts of my children and my grandchildren, I wouldn't be able to be the father, the grandfather I wanted to be. It doesn't matter that I taught parent-child relations here at UBC for many years. It doesn't matter that I may be considered the leading articulator of the developmental approach. In Canada, it matters not to Sinead, to Kiara, and to Julian. Do you follow me? None of that matters. What matters is their relationship to me is what gives me the context, what gives me what is required to be able to do this. That is why it's so important, the full attachment, but we need to make it easy for them. They will spontaneously fall into attachment when their hearts are soft enough and we make it safe enough and it's easy enough. But that's our challenge, is to move deeply into attachment. And if we do that part, then we can provide the second part. And the second part is rest. Children need to rest in a relationship. All growth emanates from a place of rest. Physical growth emanates from a place of rest. Psychological growth emanates from a rest. Well, what do we mean rest? Well, we now know that our work as humans is the work of closeness, of contact, of attachment. That's our work. And so the default setting is to make relationships work, to try to hold on to mommy and daddy, to try to preserve the connection to peers and so on. For that to be released, for a child to be released, to move on, to becoming their own person, for that to be there, somebody has to take responsibility. Children must never work for our love. They must rest in it. But unless the relationship is there, they cannot rest in it. We have gone to a practice of parenting and teaching that makes them work for the contact and closeness, that puts them in charge of the relationship. I can't be your friend if you're going to be like that. Off to your room. I withdraw the invitation to exist in my presence until you come into line. And we make them work at keeping us close. Well, we might get more compliance, but we get a deeply restless child. And we're giving rise to a whole generation of children who are restless to the core. They do not rest. Our yearning as parents and teachers, our yearning as grandparents, our yearning as uncles and aunts, for our nephews and nieces, whatever it is, but as parents, our yearning should be to give them rest. Because when we can give them rest, when they can rest from working at keeping us close, when we take that alpha position and we say, I am the one who is going to make sure that nothing, honey, nothing can separate you from my love. You can rest in it. When we do this, when we don't withdraw our affection or our invitation to exist in our presence when there is a problem, when they are at rest, their developmental destiny will unfold. Their growth will become spontaneous and automatic. I always know when I see a child who is truly growing up, becoming mature, adaptive, emergent, and integrative being, I know that somewhere in their life, someone, an adult, someone the child is attached to deeply and vulnerably, has been able to give them rest, has been able to provide them what they need. Rest is absolutely essential. One of the ways of giving a child rest is to make sure that we provide more than what is they need. You hear sometimes people say, well, don't pay any attention to him. All he wants is attention. Well, what else is there to want? And if we see a child who wants attention, why wouldn't we give it to them? Why wouldn't we meet these basic needs of affection, of attention, of mattering, of significance? The fact is we must provide more. Those of you who have heard me speak or read in a book, I share this example of Tamara, my oldest now. I think she's 37. She's here. I won't ask her. She's 7 years of age. She was bright then. She still is. And we had this little interchange, this little I love you thing. She said to me, Daddy, I love you. Had that question mark in the back. It's meant to get an I love you too. It's like a little hook, fish, and you send it back with So I said, I love you too. And then there was this moment of pregnant silence. And she says to me, in childish wisdom, Daddy, if you really loved me, you would have said it first. The males here will recognize this as female logic. But it's true. It's true. Now, it didn't mean I had to say it first, but it meant that she was in charge. Do you see that? She was in charge. I needed to seize the lead. Oh, Tamara, I had to have a bigger I love you. Or I had to trump. It had to be trumped. You always have to give more for there to be relaxation. A person comes and asks you for a hug. Well, here's a hug. No, I need a hug. Oh, here's a hug. Doesn't work. Why? How do you release a hug? You have to hug harder. That's always the way it is. The role of the parent is to give more than what is pursued. That is the only way a child can rest. The only way. And if we can give rest, then our next challenge is to give room. If the relationship is there, we can give the rest. We can find a way of providing for this child, and there will be growth. There will be growth. And our next challenge is to make room for budding individuality, for a child to become his own person. Now, nature takes care of this themselves. Now, I'll just illustrate this very, very quickly here before we go to the final portion of tonight. But just very, very quickly, nature will take care of this. As a child needs to be able to be more mobile, not be close to mom and dad anymore, the answer to that, of course, is in being like. But likeness is awfully crippling to individuality. To have to be like, to imitate, to take on the same form as your parents. Where's the room for being different? Well, nature's answer to this is in belonging and loyalty. But there's another problem with loyalty, is you have to agree with your parents all the time. Take the same side as all the time. That is rather confining. Don't you worry, move to a deeper level. If you matter to, now you've got room for differences. Do you follow me? Now you've got room for this. You don't have to be with each other all the time. You don't have to be like each other all the time. In other words, the answer is not less attachment. The answer is more. It's not less. Oh, but what? There's always times when you're not the most important. You're not the most significant. Don't you worry. If you're connected at the hearts, you'll still feel the connection, even though you may not be the most important all the time. And sometimes even the best in relationships, in marriage, we may lose the feelings of love and affection for each other. But if we can experience a deep knowledge, a deep companionship and knowing of each other, we have an intimacy that is not threatened. The more ways we have of holding on, the less we're threatened by what doesn't work. The answer is always more attachment, not less. This answers that big question that we've got wrong in our society. Well, don't children have to separate from their parents sometime? Don't they have to become their own persons? Don't they have to detach? Don't they have to separate in order to grow up? No, the deeper they attach. Parenting is forever, for good or for bad. The deeper the attachment, the more room for individuality. And when you get to the last part, both are one and synonymous. When you can express that which exists in you is the ultimate expression of individuality and of intimacy simultaneously. It is met. There is no difference there in terms of the closeness. You can be both close and be yourself at the same time. Well, let me move on. The last part of this, I want to talk about 3 rituals of relationship. You set your time, your bladders, at 15 minutes. You'll be okay. Rituals of relationship. I'll just take a brief sip. Our culture has had rituals of relationship. Ways of doing things in which there are no words. Rituals there's not words for. It's been embedded in our society, ways of building, the things that, a liturgy of relationship, if you like, ways that cultivate relationship. As culture erodes, we are losing these rituals. They're becoming extinct, at least in relationship to children. There's 3 of these. I talk about them. Again, in the writing, Hold On to Your Kids, and in most of the material they will be there. But I need to share these with you as I think that they're the most important. One, they're disappearing. We need to bring them into consciousness. The first is collecting. We need to collect the children in our care. I couldn't find a word for this. This process, it didn't exist in the English language, the one I wanted. And so I had to just kind of borrow a word to collect. What do I mean here? There's a process by which we enact or activate a relationship with a child. A process by which we cultivate a relationship. And you can see that's most clearly with infants. It's very, very simple. It's been studied under the term courtship rituals, but when we think of courtship, of course, we think of collecting a mate. And this is far more basic, far more broad than this, and I'll just illustrate it very briefly. Let's say we need to take care of an infant. Well, when we get into working distance with them, the first thing that we're going to do is try to collect their eyes. Now, it's kind of interesting with infants to collect their eyes sometimes. They're going all over the place, and so do we. To intercept and being able to get their eyes, and you try to do this. That's not very dignified with an older child. And so there's a way of doing this, is you look at what they're attending to, you make a few comments on that, whatever they are, this, that, the other thing, and then you intercept. But you'll notice it's much different when you collect rather than you demand. Many parents and teachers today have very bad attachment manners. They say, look at me, listen to me. They demand attention. They try to do this rather than collect. We're meant to collect this part. We have to collect their eyes. And that's the first part we do. Now, the infant can hold us at bay with their eyes. Don't you come a step closer. I'm going to cry. The eyes are incredible. They give the most very basic invitation out. Even a baby, an infant, will either invite you into her presence or keep you at bay. That's phenomenal. That's instinctive in all of us. That's the fundamental invitation. Now we need to get that invitation to come close. So what do? We got to get those eyes to smile. Well, what do you do to get them to smile? Well, if nobody's looking, what don't we do to get them to smile? Smiles beget smiles, and so we work at that. And then most of us have a great repertoire that we can pull out to get the smile, and it feels so good when we can get that baby to smile. Right? So we've got that invitation. Now, for good measure, if the child's a bit older, we're going to try and go for a nod. Nod's a very good symbol that somebody's already agreeing with us. And so nods beget nods. And then when they're older yet, we ask them inane questions like, oh, do you really like that color? Is that what you're doing? And etc. And oh, it's really cold outside, and something like this, but we got to get a nod. Now, what I've described to you is the essence of the greeting ritual. When you met somebody here today, when you came that you knew, you tried to get their eyes, a smile, and a nod. Oh, look at, aren't the rhododendrons pretty outside? Yeah, nod. Just things like that, right? That's what you were doing. This is the essence of a greeting ritual. In every culture, the greeting ritual is the basic ritual of relationship. It builds it, it activates one is there. It makes it active as that relationship. We start with infants. We need to collect our children. You get in the child's space or face in a friendly way. You collect the eyes, the smile, and the nod. Now, when you try to do that today, and let's say somebody didn't give you their eyes, or if you got their eyes, you didn't get a smile, and you didn't get the nod, the first thing that occurs to you is, what's wrong? Or move on. But what's wrong? In other words, the first thing you do is you go into assessment. And the first thing you look at is there anything wrong in the relationship? When was the last time we met? Did I say something wrong? Did I hurt the person's feelings? Do you follow me? Like, if we moved to collect our children and we found our teens, if we moved our 7-year-olds and our 9-year-olds, if we did this, we know we do this with friends, we do this with adults. We've lost the ritual of doing this with our children. If we did this with our children, we would know intuitively that there was something wrong. If you cannot collect the eyes, the smile, and the nod of your teenager, you've got a relationship problem on your hands. And if you've got a relationship problem on your hands, confronting with futility is going to get aggression. Direction is going to get resistance. Do you follow? Now it all fits together. You got a glimpse of the big picture. The relationship must be there, so you must collect. Now here's another little tip for you. You can work, if your spouses aren't here, practice this with your spouses. Just a little tip for you to give you something to take home, a little mantra. Before you say, honey, would you set the table, or put the dishes away, or do this, get their eyes, a smile, and a nod. Get them nodding first. And then put in your request. Collect before you direct. Now don't follow every collection with direction, or else the child is going to smell that something is up. But unless we collect, we don't activate the instincts to want to be good for us, to be able to keep us close, to measure up to our expectations. Even if a child is in good relationship, especially with a child who doesn't have mixed feelings yet, any preschooler and any immature child, you need to be able to collect them before you work with them. That's the place you work. You bring them on side with a good intention. The first one was to get in the child's face or space in a friendly way, collect the eyes, a smile, and a nod. The second one is the part where we take our position as nurturer. We invite the child to feed at our table. We say, I am your answer. But it's also a test. With the infant, we try to get our finger into this little palm of the hand right over here. And what we're looking for is that little hand to close over our finger. Now, that's one of about 35 attachment instincts that a child is born with. What we're actually doing is we're testing to see, is that child mine yet? Is it workable? We're testing to see if the child is holding us close. But we provide something of our own, in this case, a touch of proximity for the child to hold on to. If the child isn't ready, the hand hyperextends, and we got to go back to first base, trying to be able to get the eyes, the smile, and the nod. Now, you can't do this with everybody, although we try with a handshake. And you know, in a married couple, you put your hand and see if there's a response. And if there's not tonight. It's not going to work. And there's various ways that we do. This is a little bit of a test, you see, that we find out if the attachment is working. If it's there, there's a response to it, and so on. And so it's two things. One, we're taking the initiative in terms of their relationship. Two, it's a bit of a test to see if the child is ours. Now, touch is only one of 5 different senses. We can touch with the eyes, the warmth of our voice, the twinkle in our eye. We can touch, but we can do much more than that. We can also move to say we're a lot of alike, work the sameness direction, the being alike, me too. We can work with significance, being able to give a sign that one matters, that is important, a sign of affection, a sign of liking. There are so many different ways when you understand relationship in all the stages that we can give this touch of proximity. We can give this wonderful touch of proximity to hold on to, both as a test to see if the child holds on to it, their child is ours, also as a way of cultivating and building a relationship. The researchers say that there are three interactions that are more powerful than any other in cultivating a relationship. They are interactions characterized by delight, by warmth, and by enjoyment. I like to think of it as basically giving the invitation to exist in our presence, the most significant invitation we could ever give to another human being. That invitation should be given generously, liberally, frequently to our children. They need to know that they are invited to exist in our presence. That is the most fundamental invitation we can give. And then we can get on to the part where we invite the child to depend. Our arms to the infant go out. And if they are ready, their arms come out and they're old enough to receive. And here we take the position of the alpha role. You can lean on me. I will take care of you. Your problems are my problems. I will be your answer right now. And that is that invitation that invites them to depend. Now, shouldn't we be concerned about independence? I mean, shouldn't we, after all, if they're toddlers or preschoolers or adolescents, shouldn't we be saying to them that don't expect me to do anything for you that you could or should do for yourself? If we give dependence an inch, won't it take a mile? The opposite is true. There's no way, research shows, that we can push independence. We can't push independence. That's what nature does. Our job is to invite dependence, especially in matters of relationship. The research shows very concretely that the parents who say to their 2-year-olds, you can walk on your own 2 feet now, don't expect me to pick you up, have 2-year-olds that are preoccupied with being picked up. And the parents who say, come here, I miss picking you up, let me carry you, have toddlers who are preoccupied with walking on their own 2 feet. Such is life. Now, I'm going to very quickly go over 2 more in just a couple of minutes with these because I want to touch on them. They're absolutely essential. The second attachment ritual is what I call bridging what could divide. It is to the greeting, it is what we would call the goodbye ritual, except in English it doesn't translate very well. To bridge what could divide is when you are separating from your loved one. Not separating, I mean when you're going away someplace. When distance would come between you, when you can't be with. After a hug, a closeness, a ritual of closeness, your immediate response is to bridge whatever would come between. So you say, I'll call you from the airport. When I get to this place, I will give, it will be 3, whatever, to a little kid, 3 sleeps, and whatever it is, you always put the focus on the return. The whole issue, how do you preserve relationship? You bridge whatever would come between. You always put the focus on the return. Now, we do this with little kids. in terms of, but we forget. That's the most important thing at bedtime. When they enter into separation, you put the focus on it. In the morning, we'll be doing this. When they go to school, and then I'll pick you up and we'll be doing this. We should be doing this all the way along, just like we do in our adult relationships. We bridge what would come divide. But the most important thing that divides us is troubling behavior, problem behavior. I get asked over and over again, well, what do you say to a child who misbehaves? The most important thing you can do, if you throw in the infraction flag and you say this isn't good, that's not what I asked for, you know that's against the rules, the next thing you must do is you must bridge it. We're still okay. I'll still your dad. I'm looking forward to watching that hockey game with you tonight. I've got this plan for you after, and you show that you can bridge. The relationship goes on. And if you show the relationship goes on, you've said this isn't a relationship issue, this is just a behavior issue. But it's not enough to say to a child, well, mommy loves you anyway. It doesn't work. You've got to be able to focus on the return. You've got to be able to bridge the divide. If you're a teacher and you have to send a child out of class, you put the focus on the return. I'm still your teacher. Well, okay, I've got this thing planned for you when you get back, and we'll do this, and you put the focus, and it says, we've survived. In French, it's au revoir. In German, it's auf Wiedersehen. And in Old English, it was, God be with you until we meet again. Always the focus on the return. This is the way we preserve relationship. And the final ritual is matchmaking in society. We've lost that art. Matchmaking, introductions. Attachments are meant to beget attachments. Where my grade 1 teacher failed me, and I even have a hard time saying anything negative about her, I'm still so loyal. Where she failed me is she did not introduce me to my grade 2 teacher. She did not matchmake. She did not endear me to. Today we have the responsibility when we give birth to children to also give rise to the attachments that they require to be raised in. We need to matchmake, introduce them to their kindergarten teacher, to their preschool teacher. We need to do the matchmaking. When we do this, we create the village of attachment that is required. Today's parents and teachers are not endearing children to those who are responsible for them, and those who are responsible to their children are not introducing. These are two ancient rituals in society. This is what builds villages. These are the rituals of attachment. Again, we're losing consciousness of these. We wouldn't even have to talk about these things if culture was working well. But culture is not working well. And therefore, the things that we're doing that are no different than our parents and grandparents are not working as well either. Now we need to bring these into consciousness. We need to find out what is the essence of them. We need to collect our children. We need to bridge whatever would divide. And we need to be able to matchmake them to those who are responsible for them. The final thought, then, the keys to raising children, then, if we were to summarize these into its simplest elements, the keys to raising children are right relationships. By right relationships, I mean deep relationships, safe relationships, deep emotional connections, but also in a dependent mode to those who are responsible for them. Right relationships and soft hearts. When children are not in right relationship, they don't have soft hearts. And when they don't have soft hearts, they don't fall into right relationship or develop right relationship. These two things, in intuitive terms, are the most important aspects in terms of parenting. All our words and all our consciousness has gone in our society today to how to parent, how to teach. In fact, there's even pedagogy has been the art and science of teaching. Now there's a science, or there's not really a science, called parentology, which has become the equivalent of it. But the focus is on the act. The focus is on what to do rather than the relationship. that the relationship matters most. The good thing about relationship is it's never too late. The good thing about relationship is when it's there, for better or for worse, it goes on forever. But the relationship, again, is what we need to put words to, what we need to bring into consciousness. As I said in the beginning, I suspect that I have not shared with you anything that you do not already know, at least know intuitively. But I hope that I've been able to give you some words, that my words have been able to paint a picture, that being able to get a glimpse of the picture, we understand what our challenge is today. To be able to counteract the loss of culture by bringing into consciousness the fact that relationship matters and matters of relationship. It is my hope that as we open our eyes to that which is right underneath our noses, that our natural intuition as parents and teachers can be restored. Thank you so much for inviting me by your presence and for giving me a chance to speak on these things. Thank you.